Oh, well, let's see. 2 videos back, I was talking about purchasing commercial amendments. And I went on to talking about manures, because I kind of didn't mention them very much in the first one. But then I started thinking about it this morning as I uploaded that video, and I said, things here in Hawaii, though, they're kind of different. I've told people before, whatever it is you know about land, homes, growing, and whatever, in the mainland, you probably need to take Hawaii 101 to get re-educated when you come here, because things really are quite a bit different. To begin with, almost everything gets shipped here. That makes a lot of difference. Okay, it does in price, naturally. Also, maybe in wait time. Also in availability, which comes down to that. I have people frequently asking me, "Well, Bill, what was the brand name on that fertilizer, or what sort of soil were you using, or what was the name on that jar of spinosad?" Well, I almost never say brand names. I'll talk about materials, the item, whatever it is, chemically, or, maybe the fertilizer breakdown or something on that order, but I almost never talk about brand names. And one of the reasons I don't, well, aside from the fact that I don't own any of those companies, so why should I promote them? But the availability of materials for me here is constantly doing a shell game. Yeah, what I'm using this week is probably not what I used last week, and might not be what I use next month. It depends on what got on the boat or what sold out. It's like that a lot. I try to keep things that are very important to me for growing in reserve in large quantities. So there's another thing that would be different here in Hawaii. If you're a serious grower, you are probably going to keep a stockpile of things like fertilizers. In my case, the bags of soil that I use for propagating plants. I keep the Pro Mix or Sun Grow in bales stacked up over here waiting for me. The chicken manure, pelletized chicken manure from Stutzman, Nutra-Rich. There's a brand name I'll pass along, Nutra-Rich. I keep that also in large quantities. Usually buy it, 6 50-pound sacks at a time, usually, because it does come and go. The reason I use it and promote it is the lowest cost, commercially available organic fertilizer that you can get in Hawaii. That's my main love of it. That and it's rocket fuel. Stutzman's Nutra-Rich, which is not composted manure. This is dry manure made into pellets, like little good and plenties. They're easy to handle. It doesn't smell bad until it gets wet, and so on and so forth. So it's very convenient stuff. It's pretty much all purpose. I don't use it on orchids, but I use it on just about anything else around here. I do, and I buy that in large quantities because it has disappeared before for a while. Sometimes things are gone for a month or more. So we do have different issues here, whereas on the mainland, before you had these supply chain problems due to the COVID, probably stuff was pretty much sitting on the shelf whenever you needed it, most of the time. So, as I say, most everything that we use here horticulturally has actually been imported from some other source, West Coast, a lot of it. But not everything. There's a mini Huni compost facility over here on Oahu that makes bag soils in different sorts of garden preparations and whatnot. They've got quite a few things in their line. I've looked at the stuff. It seems okay. Yeah, it seems all right. Like a lot of things in Hawaii, it's pretty expensive. Yeah, it costs more to rot down a pile of garbage around here than it does in the mainland, right? Yeah, right. So we do have some local production. Probably most of the islands have their own municipal compost production. We have it here in Hilo, and from what I understand, the compost from the facility is no charge. You haul your own, or you hire a trucker to go and haul, or whatever. But a lot of people use it on an island that's a whole lot of hard rock lava. I'd say having a local compost facility is a real good idea. Now, I have concerns as far as sanitation and spreading of vectoring problems. The island itself is a real trap for pests. You get just a couple of bugs into some load of green goods delivered over here, and they can get loose in the environment, begin breeding, and next thing you know, they're the next big problem in Hawaii. We import troublesome stuff here all the time. It's constant. Whether some of it is actually imported intentionally as agricultural terrorism, or whether these are accidentals or whether it's both. I don't know. We'll go for conspiracy. I might be the only guy who ever talks about agricultural terrorism anyway. I really believe that our government is focused on jets, assault rifles, landmines, and we don't necessarily see people importing pests and diseases to destabilize an agricultural system in a country as being warfare. But, just like we're catching on to the fact that, wow, they wage war on the internet too, digital piracy, digital technology. Well, I think it's been going on for a long time with ag products and ag problems too, and it's just under the radar. We get a new bug. Oh, how'd it get here? Well, I don't know. It's been in somebody's suitcase. It was probably North Korea. Anyway, so that aside, when you look at the amount of pests that get in here, I am very concerned about keeping my own property here sanitary, safe, clean, and so I don't bring in much of anything onto this property. I bring in seeds. I'll bring in some plant material, especially if it's, I'll quarantine it. Yeah, we'll check it for fire ants and whatnot. Even if it came from a legitimate nursery like Planet Hawaii down the street here or something, I'm still quarantining and checking stuff in. A lot of stuff that comes from much more questionable sources. I usually knock it all out of the pots, shake off all the media, inspect, wash, clean, and repot in fresh media from a package that was commercially available and I was quite confident was clean. So we're cautious even about bringing in plants. I bring in seed a lot. I'll bring in any kind of seed usually, but when it comes to hauling in the municipal compost, for instance, I won't do it. I've got a lot of reasons why. Possible chemical contamination, when you take lawn clippings or debris from trees or whatever it is, your rose garden, which I don't have here, and you dump it in the green bin, they pick it up, they put it through the compost facility. Well, you reduce the volume of the green stuff considerably, maybe even 75 to 80% reduction in volume, but you don't reduce the chemical content. Most of these, like the weed and feeds for lawn fertilizers, systemic insecticides and fungicides used for roses and other plants, these things usually do not break down under the heat of composting. And so you end up with a concentration. Yeah, you can concentrate them. I ran across a customer in California who built himself some big raised beds, and he hated the local soil because there was some clay in it, and had an attitude towards the native earth, and so he didn't want to grow anything in that earth. And he built these beds, and he went to the compost facility in Fremont, California, and he got enough of this local municipal compost to fill those beds with. So he had tomatoes that were planted basically in pure municipal compost. compost. They didn't add sand, perlite, native soil, or much anything else to it. Well, he came back to me at the desk in the nursery a few months later, because they bought the plants from me, and they said, "Bill, what's wrong with my plants? Do they have a virus?" I looked at him, I started asking questions, and pretty soon I figured out what he had done, and I had to inform him, look, this is an herbicide toxicity. There was so much of the weed and feed from grass clippings in that compost that it was affecting the tomato plants. It looked kind of virus-like. It can be very difficult sometimes to tell the difference optically by looking at it between a virus and herbicide damage. They can get close. Anyway, so I've seen it. I know Rodale, the organic gardening people, for years they've been pressing on this. You can find it, I don't know what issues, but there have been many articles about this problem. It really does exist. It's not a myth. Okay. So I'm very cautious about what I bring onto the farm. Yeah, I don't want to create problems for myself. It's bad enough. I get just a moment ago heard wild chickens over the fence. Well, they get in here, they eat my tomatoes and stuff, you know. I've seen the roosters 20 feet up in the air in my fruit trees eating Rolinias. So, you know, I don't, even when I'm careful, I still end up with stuff, you know. It took us a lot of money and fencing to keep the pigs out of here, and so on. So, yeah, I don't want it. So pretty much almost everything that I use here that didn't come in a very safe sanitary form that I was quite confident about, you know, then I pretty much grew it right here on the farm and used it. So we do a lot of our own compost growing right here. Most folks around Puna and Hilo are familiar with terms like chop and drop or stick mulch. These are all terms that refer to growing one crop and cutting it to throw on another, you know. Cover crops, too. Cover crops. So there's a variety of different possible ways that you can utilize one plant as food and as amendment in soil for another. You know, if you're in the mainland, you got things like alfalfa and clover that are just like, wow, you know, they're from heaven, man. Those plants are so wonderful. No, they don't grow worth a darn here, so we have to find alternatives. It took me quite a while. Yeah, most of the say cover crop seed, for instance, is commercially available on the mainland. The vast majority of it isn't really very suitable for use here. Mustard works. I use Pacific Gold mustard as a green manure. When I say green manure, you're all aware of what this means, you know, that you've planted a plant and you have then killed it and used it as both fertilizer and amendment. In the case of mustard, it's also used as a nemicide. Yeah, you lay the leaves on top of the ground. You don't turn them in. And the gas they produce as they decompose chases nematodes out of the soil. I am pretty sure that there are a bunch of other plants that also have that same reaction with nematodes. Okay, I'm quite sure that peppermint, for instance, which is a very aggressive, creeping, running ground cover. Now, when you're in a tropical environment like Hawaii and you got tropical rainforest jungle weeds growing all over the place, trust me, plants that gardeners don't like mint, because it runs, over here, they're wonderfully suitable candidates for using because they're actually strong enough to compete with some of the local wild vegetation we get here. I have found that you can actually wipe mint out here. Yes, yeah, I have seen the mint retreat in my gardens in this area. But I believe that the oil in mint is actually a nemicide. I have no proof. I don't know if there's any studies on it. I've never looked. It's just a guess. Intuitive feeling. The ageratum, which is a nasty little blue-flowered weed we got around here. It also has one heck of a stinky oil, and a lot of folks get rashes from it. Okay, well, I think it's actually also a nematicide, and so when it's grows up, you get a blanket about so high, I cut it, lay it, just let it lay there on the dirt to decompose. And, well, something seems to be chasing nematodes out of my garden. And so I got a feeling it's a cluster of some things, it's a variety of things, but count's going down constantly. And a lot of it has to do with the plants that I'm using. So, when it comes to cover crops, as I said, that the mustard is a real good one to chop it and drop it. Then we also, though, have crops where we can actually grow the crop along with the beneficial or the nurse crop. Here, let's take a look at some of this stuff. Yeah, so right here you'll see this little plant with the tiny blue button flowers on it there. That's the ageratum. And it's a volunteer. This thing comes on its own. It can be considered a nasty weed, but I actually think the oil chases away nematode. So, right here, you'll see the stalks of sweet corn. And underneath, we have a legume called perennial peanut with its little yellow flowers. And that stuff is running all over here underneath my corn. It's a nitrogen-fixing ground cover. Right here at the base of this papaya is some peppermint. And a little bit more over there too. Papaya is susceptible to nematode. I believe that the mint at the base over here keeps the nematodes off. It's a creeper, and so it increases itself and spreads. I usually lose it when I flame too much, or like here I've been mulching with cardboard, and so I've covered a lot of it. Right here, I got pigeon pea. It's a tropical legume shrub. The peas are edible. You use them to make the junto rice here, or arroz con gandules. It's a good chop and drop when it's used with, citrus, for instance, avocado, or other taller type fruit trees, because it'll grow up 4 feet or more between the choppings. Lives for, I don't know, 4 to 5 years probably. Well, this big silvery looking beast of a tree over here is the kukui nut. Kukui nut, they use it to make those kukui nut leis. It was brought here originally because it was a candle nut. They could use it for light. It had so much oil. They could drill a hole, maybe put some kind of wick or something in there and light it, burn it like a candle. It's also been used in medicine. It works as a laxative in large doses. and small doses, toasted ground kukui nut is used to season poke in the original recipes. Well, the tree fixes an enormous amount of phosphorus. It also produces a huge volume of compost. This one here has not been used for stick mulching. It is shade over the top of Ellen's anthuriums and her ground orchids. That's what we're using it for. But the tree, if planted alternate with rows of some sort of a crop, and then cut constantly and thrown on the ground under the crop, it can be used for what they call stick mulching. Next to it, right over there, is an Inga. That's an ice cream bean. This is the Inga edulis with the big 3-foot long pods. Now that is also another tree used for stick mulching. That one has not been used as a stick mulch, obviously, but it fixes nitrogen. I get the idea here. Because of sanitation, and that I don't want to bring in alien objects that are going to start to spread here on the farm, I use an awful lot of plants in situ or plants in site to use as fertilizers and compost. But black cinder is commonly used here. Now, again, when you have nothing but hard rock lava, that stuff's a blessing. It's not that expensive, and it's loose. You can plant things in it. You can grow stuff in cinder, So it's valuable that way. I would highly recommend that it be mixed with some form of compost, 50-50 or so, when you're using it that way. In potting soils, it's used frequently. When there's too much of it, it's nasty. Like I said, you can get by with it here, but you leave the island with it and forget it. The value to cinder is say like ProMix or SunGrow, these professional growers mediums that are predominantly milled sphagnum moss and perlite. When sphagnum moss becomes perfectly dry, it becomes hydrophobic. It will not take on water. It stuff runs right off the top like it's a desert. You actually see a silvery sheen when the water hits because it's not going in. Well, if you got cinder mixed with it and or perlite and or pumice, these are porous, open. They will take water in and then release it back into the moss to get it re-wetted. So, up here in Mountain View, because it rains so much, I can get away with using the ProMix or SunGrow straight in a container. I don't mix it with anything. It's just right out of the bag. But I know plants that I grew that way that were beautiful when I sold them to Joe Hewitt, and he took them down the mountain to Hilo, where it was hotter and it was drier. He was having a heck of a time. He couldn't get the stuff re-wetted again once it became dry. And so he started using cinder mixed with his grow mixes for a good reason. So, so cinder has its value, and that is an amendment that we have here. Manures can be found occasionally around the island. If you got chickens or somebody who's got chickens, you can probably get your hands on that stuff. Fish is another thing here. Definitely, we're surrounded by the ocean. There's a lot of fish out there. Fish is outstanding fertilizer. And of course, you want to eat the good parts and have sashimi, but the rest of this stuff, well, I guess you can boil fish carcasses down and make stock. But even then, what's left can still be used as fertilizer. So the waste left from fish is top-notch stuff. Now, usually somebody's got their hands on it. That's the problem around here, especially if it's not something that's like open to the commercial market and is being sold commonly. If it's one of these things, like that's, a fisherman. Well, if you know a fisherman, you're all set. I've known some guys who even got into the local fish markets here at times, made connections and got that much waste. But it's one of those things where you really got to kind of know somebody because it's coveted. Everybody uses it. It's good stuff. Another thing that's readily available here on the island, and that's coffee waste. And, you could use the waste from coffee cherry. That would work. The hull from coffee also will work. These are local source products. But actually, I think Starbucks is probably more useful in that regard because there aren't very many people around here picking up the coffee grounds. Coffee grounds a little acetic, but that's potent stuff. A lot of nitrogen in there. And so I talked to the guys at the coffee shops. I know I was able to pick it up for a while. I was growing mushrooms on it even. You can use it for mushroom medium. It's so strong. Things come and go. They become fads. A lot of, I refer to it as fads. For a while we had a fair amount of biochar being produced over here. Biochar is an excellent amendment. Look into the archaeology, actually. Terra Prieta culture, Amazon. We had a group of individuals in the Amazon before the Spanish ever got there and the Portuguese that apparently they knew how to farm in Amazon and to feed huge populations. And one of the things they used was biochar. Hard to say whether they were intentionally making it or how this was coming about, but it was the addition of basically activated charcoal. Charcoal that's made by pyrolytic conversion, where you're not burning off all the carbon, you're leaving most of the carbon in place. Stuff becomes very stable. It holds a tremendous amount of moisture in soil. It will make little homes in the tubes of the wood for fungi, bacteria, and stuff. So it really enhances the health of soil. For the terra prieta culture, which means dark earth or black earth, these are pockets yet today in the Amazon. They're historical artifacts where some people actually own pockets of the terra prieta soil. These were built. The soils were made, probably using trash, I know, broken pieces of pottery, and biochar, wood that was not, instead of being slash and burned, like we would do today, instead it was done with very low oxygen, so the carbon stayed. And they claim with the terra prieta soils today, they can actually be harvested and they will regrow. It's a culture like yeast and bread dough. That's what I hear. Anyway, biochar had its fad here. There's still some people producing it. I think it's great stuff. It's kind of a pain in the butt. You got to make it. And you got to make it without oxygen. I have made small batches using a standard Weber grill. Yeah, but in large batches, I'd have to get an end loader out here, I think. Throw a bunch of ohia or guivy wood in there, and then once I get it burning, rebury it again to let it smolder in the charcoal underneath the soil away from oxygen. That's the only way I'd ever get enough of it to use it for anything, because it's a process, and I'm not into the process. For a while, we had the Korean farming method here. What do they call that? IMO, indigenous microorganisms. Now, this hit Hawaii first. I guess when it comes to things from Asia, this is a Korean idea, they often get here first. Then they'll move from here to the mainland. I've had requests over the years from the mainland to talk more about IMO. Here, it's pretty much burned out. Yeah, it was a fad. It didn't work out for a lot of us the way the Koreans think it does. So you can look into that. People use it. It's a recipe. You make this type of an amendment and this type and that type. And it's a little bit like homeopathic medicine, where these guys believe that the more you dilute the stuff down, the more powerful it gets. I don't know. A lot of it doesn't follow science in the way I understand it. I'm not very interested in it. For a while, they were selling IMO fertilizers over here. People were growing, indigenous microbes and putting them in bags and selling it to other people. Kind of silly because the indigenous microbes were already here because they're indigenous, but whatever. There is, in my opinion, when it comes to soil amendments, fertilizers, and practices, there's a lot of snake oil out there. Yeah. And it comes and goes in the form of fads. Now, one thing that hit years ago was organic farming and gardening. That one stuck. It's because it was real. It was a good idea, and the principles and the practices, they work very well. Well, I'm sure I've missed plenty. Probably overlooked at least a dozen things. You guys can get back to me. Let me know what I forgot, okay? But basically around here, when it comes to fertilizers and amendments, whatever you can find locally sourced, top-notch, and what you can actually produce within the boundaries of the property itself. Use relationships between your plants, okay? It's going to help. Hang loose, folks. Aloha until later.